My name is Brydie O'Brien. My traditional Gitxsan name is Giluget. I live here in Hazelton, and I am a hereditary chief here in the Gitxsan Nation.
We're here in the town of Hazelton, British Columbia. Could you tell me about this locale?
Well, actually, you're in close to the middle of the traditional territories of the Gitxsan people. And we're sitting here in the chief's office, which is located in the municipality of Old Hazelton. So we have 22,000 square kilometers of traditional territory. And it's a land that I've lived on my entire life. It's a land that has sustained the Gitxsan civilization for time of millennia, they say, right? So thousands of years, this has been our home.
Is there an origin mythology that unifies your story of creation itself?
Gosh, you mean the creation story? Gosh, there's a few of them, but oh gosh, I don't want to go into those, honestly. I don't want to go into those.
That could take more time.
Yeah, and it dips into a little bit of our history, in a sense that it could touch on people's the history of our houses too. So it's not something that I'm comfortable talking about as creation stories with it.
You have the Ayookw law system.
Yes.
Could you tell me what that is?
So the laws, well, Gitxsan, we are a civilization, and every civilization has a set of laws. And so the Gitxsan, we have laws that pertain to our connection with land, with our relationships, laws that relate to kinship, laws that relate to the transferring of names, traditional and hereditary names, laws that relate to marriage, divorce. There's laws that cover all aspects of spirituality. Right? There's a number of different laws that we live by still today.
And these laws existed for time immemorial.
Yeah.
But then other laws came along, a colonial legal system. Was that a collision? Was it a merge? What happened there? And where are we now?
Well, that's a really good question. It didn't seem, as a child, it didn't seem like a collision. Because I was born at a time when we were integrating both the Western world and our traditional world. So it didn't feel to me like a collision. And when we look at where we are today, and we look at the relationships that we're trying to formulate with government and industry in response to the demand for the lands and the resources that we now have rights over, that there's definitely a collision of the laws and how they make the decisions versus how we make decisions, right? There's completely different worldviews, right? And how we view the territories versus and how we use them and how we've grown to learn to govern them and to protect them. It's definitely, we look at standing timber as can be ceremonial. It's sustenance. It's the connection of our culture, both spiritually and physically. It defines who we are, and in other Western world, it could be viewed as a resource. It's economic. So we grapple, right, with these worldviews when we're in regular everyday life, but also when we're trying to build relationships with industry or organizations that have some connection to resource extraction, resources.
And is there a defined goal on why you would want to engage at all or in the way that you are for the purposes of the Gitxsan?
I think the purpose to engage for us is that what it feels like is that there's this economic agenda, of course, for the province to be able to sustain itself.
The larger picture outside of this community.
That's right. And so we've managed for a very long time, aside from, of course, forestry, but with LNG or pipelines, we've managed to, to keep our territories pristine. But the pressures of the economic situation here in the province, I think, is putting more pressures on us, and has for a number of years, really, the last 14 or so years. So we're seeing a lot more of the interactions and the engagements with industry and with the government. But it's a real struggle, I think, for all of us, because we want to see the territories left as is. Many of us want to honor the history of the lands and honor the territories and what it means to us and how we've survived on it and worked with it and partnered with it. And now for us to be in a situation where the pressure is real for the Gitxsan people, economically as well, for the Gitxsan people to engage with large industry projects. One is to be more economically self-sustaining is some of the pressures that we're hearing. That we have a lot of social issues because of residential schools and the 60 scoop and so forth. We've got admittedly, we have social pressures too that we need to address, and so that pressure is on us to do something. And it's there's varying perspectives in the nation about whether or not we should be engaging or not, and at what cost should we be engaging. So there's a lot to be considered and a lot to be balanced, because when it comes to our laws, we have, as I mentioned, a number of laws, and one of them is the kinship law, is the autonomy that our Giluget have to manage their traditional territories. And that is a law. I, as Giluget, have the right to determine who accesses our territory. I have wing chiefs who also have high names that have territory, and it's our collective right to determine who has access. And as my grandmother explained it to me, Mary Mackenzie, she held the name Giluget as I was growing up, and so part of her grooming was to tell me and teach us as a family these stories, and one of them was that when she has the right to determine whether or not anyone accesses our traditional territory. So accessing meaning trespassing or crossing or needing to access, wanting to trap, wanting to hunt, wanting to fish. So that's what access meant in her time. You know, there's the grease trail, so it was pedestrian, or snowshoeing, so it was very, in comparison to today, it was very minimal impact, right? So you have that law of autonomy that we have the right to determine who accesses our territory. But in this world that we find ourselves in now, with pipelines that actually now overlap a number of different territories, then the other law that invokes is that we as hereditary chiefs do not have the right to infringe on or to cause cause harm in any way to the environment, to the land itself, to the ability for the chief to be able to do their free will on their lands as well. So we have a responsibility to make sure that we confer with our neighboring territory holders. And that's another nation, or that's within our own nation. So there is the autonomy law, but there's also this responsibility to ensure that we ourselves are not putting harm on the lands next to us or downstream to us. So yes, we have autonomy, but in this world, the law of ensuring that we're conferring and respecting our neighboring chiefs, but also we have as Simgigit, we have the responsibility to make sure that we confer with our house members to keep peace and balance, right? To honor and to respect their voice and their role that they play within our house, and our house being our house group. So that's more the immediate family. There might be different lineages in that house. And then we have what we call the Wilnadat, which is an extended family. So you have historical connections to these people. So, for example, our Wilnadat is we have myself and Luce, which is another hereditary chief name. We have Wielas to the high ranking of Goldo. And so when we consult within our house, we include our Wilnadat as well and make sure that we all move together, that we all support one another. And sometimes it takes a bit of time, but we have that responsibility to consult with one another, because at the end of the day, we're really looking for peace and harmony. That's the ultimate goal in when we're moving forward, because we honoring our kinships and our relationships is making sure that we do it in harmony, that we do it so that we're respecting one another's opinions, place, authority, connection to the land.
There's a lot of places in the world. This is a place too, but it's not just any place. To me, because you look around. So, tell me what makes. Tell me a little more about where we are and what makes it this incredibly special place to anyone who ever journeys here.
Oh yeah, it is an amazing space and place. The land we have. There, it's pristine at this point, right? We have, I think it's 3 different ecosystems we have, right? We have various timbers, we have various wildlife, that we have main rivers, right? We have the Bulkley, the Babine, the Skeena, right? So we've got the confluence, and we've got the Stegioden, our big brother mountain right behind us. We have the Seven Sisters Range to the west of us. So it is a magic place, and what makes it magic, I believe, is the culture and the history of our ancestors being on this land. I really feel that it gives it the soul that people feel when they come to this land. And so many people who have come have not left. They came with the intention to stay a few days, and they've stayed, because that Gitxsan Nation bites them and keeps them here, because it is a magical place.
Can you describe the experience of going to the Kispiox village and the poles there, what that is, what it signifies, and what its past and future is?
Totem poles in Kispiox are a collection of houses, hereditary houses and families that raise these totem poles. The totem poles are a significant, they're our history, they're our archives, in the sense that they carry the history that we have on the land. They carry the crests that we've developed, that we've taken from the interactions on the land, the interactions with others, the spiritual connections, the supernatural, and they tell our stories. And totem poles are set in our houses, and we say houses because we live together in longhouses. And there was always a totem pole that was put outside of the longhouse, and that depicted whose house that was, right? Because we have clans and crests that are of the supernatural, but also of the animal world. So if it was our house, for example, our Giluget longhouse, then we would have probably on ours we would have a split bear, a guamon, and a wolf, right, which depicts who we are. It's like my bracelets. They have our crests, right? My grandmother used to say, "That's not jewelry. That's who you are. It represents who you are," right? And totem poles. So they're a strong connection of the people. They're the physical representation, maybe, of the people in our connection to the land and our history. And so when they raise a totem pole, it's a very proud, and it's not done as often as it used to be. It's a very proud sense of it's not necessarily an accomplishment, but it's an honor, and it's an honoring of the ancestors and honoring your connection. It's very proud, right, to raise a totem pole. And so to be able to have the totem pole still standing, because we still raise totem poles, but not as often as we used to. They used to be outside, like I said, outside of each longhouse, but now we have a standing in Kitwanga. They have totem poles, and we have a replica at Gitxsan, and there's a couple of smaller totem poles that the college has raised and so forth. But if you go down to Gitxsan, it'll tell you the history and the story. Each totem pole the chiefs and the house groups of the owners of those totem poles can tell you the ancient history and connection of the story of each figure on those totem poles. And so it's a wonderful place to go because it connects you back with the ancestors. It really does.
For the Gitxsan people today, many of them call this place their home, and the nearby villages, communities. But I know there's Gitxsan in Vancouver and New York City and other places. What is the Gitxsan world, and how do Gitxsan navigate through this big planet, and what does it mean to be connected to this little place on the map, and what is your sense of that? You're an educated person. You have been a leader in your community and in the field of education. You have, I'm sure, traveled places. I'm just interested in the sense of the Gitxsan world from here.
The sense of Gitxsan world from here. So you mean the connecting of? I'm sure if I'm understanding.
Yeah, let me take another run at that.
Yes.
I'm the diaspora of Gitxsan people takes them to all kinds of interesting places to do fascinating things. I'm aware of lots of Gitxsan. I mean, there's some incredibly successful, well-known Gitxsan people. Whether or not others know they're Gitxsan, but there's something, some great degree of accomplishment there. And this is the home territory of it. I'm intrigued by that because I don't know that the same is true of a lot of other First Nations that maybe are equally populous, that also have similar attributes. Gitxsan seem to be somehow the ones who get out there to an extraordinary degree to shape cultures in other places, bring their ideas to other places, contribute, but bring things back as well.
Well, and I think it's safe to say that other nations have the same, right? They have members that leave home and go off and do wonderful things. But I think maybe that the Gitxsan stand out because I think potentially that we're a very proud people, and we are determined, and I think that we are strongly rooted in our hereditary system still, and I think that gives us the conviction to stay true to who we are, and sometimes that carries us in the world with the will and the want and the know-how to make change, because we have such a strong connection to the land, such a strong conviction of keeping our hereditary system intact. And so it is difficult, or it's impossible maybe even, to separate yourself from the land even though you physically separate yourself, in that sense, is that you're always wanting to contribute back to your people. And I hear that in education. I hear it whether a student is wanting to be a professional cook, whether he wants to be a lawyer, whatever it may be. They always want to come back and serve their nation. And so I think that intrinsic passion is what you see, is the wanting to do well by our children, by our elders, by our lands, by the environment. And I think that's the passion that you're hearing about, and the change.
In a lot of the public issues, it always seems to come to a binary, because maybe the human brain wants to understand yes or no,
Yes.
right or left, or
Yeah.
yet it sometimes is not easy to understand or explain hereditary systems and other systems, especially when they're adjacent or intertwined. When we've, in the past, even in the same broad geographic region, we've seen things that become more public, and the public is invited to form views of things they see. Suddenly you have, everyone's an expert. A hereditary system needs this, and it's in conflict or contrast to a non-hereditary system. So I'll often hear people say, well, you've got the Indian Act chiefs, and that's become this term almost of derision when you hear it phrased that way. And the hereditary system, that's the one that's intact, and it's a value statement, but it doesn't necessarily reflect the actual governance as practiced in the many First Nations, where people assume it exists. And so I'm just intrigued by this, because it's a feature of more recent times that it's become in political debates.
Right.
And I'm just wondering what your take is on, as a name holder, you are the highest authority, you're a matrilineal leader in a civilization where women holding power through matrilineal lineage, which I have more questions than the knowledge on that, but I do know there's something exceptional and special about it. And I'd like to understand a little more about the, where it comes to the decision making on economic questions and the questions of infrastructure and acquiring the physical means to have the life that people want to have, because they have material wants to serve. Sometimes there's contradictions there. So there's not really a question there, but just trying to understand that.
Well, here in the Gitxsan territories, like I said, we've been here thousands of years, and our cultural laws and our traditions, and we were the civilization on these lands. So we've occupied these lands. And then in the early 50s or so it was, when the Indian Act came in, and they moved us off the lands and onto the reserves. Now that the Indian Act, or the band offices, are really an administrative arm of the federal government. So they're really there to roll out programs and services on behalf of the government. And they have the jurisdiction over the reserve lands itself, which I think is like 45 square kilometers between the Wet'suwet'en and the Gitxsan. So we're not talking large pockets of land. So band councils are elected every 2 years. And it's our hereditary chiefs, it's our communities, it's our families that run and take on those positions, and they're the governing body over the reserves.
So a hereditary chief might well have a role in an Indian Act created council.
That's right.
Right.
That's right. But from a Gitxsan perspective, the hereditary system and the Indian Act system are completely separate. So band councils don't have jurisdiction outside of the reserve. And that's the jurisdiction that the government gave, right? And that's the way we understand it, and that's the way it stays here in the Gitxsan territories. So we have a number of bands, and they each have the authority over the small pocket of land that they have jurisdiction over. And it's the hereditary system. It's all of our hereditary chiefs with the inherent right to govern the traditional territories. And there is no, it's a really very clear understanding. I've heard it referenced just this past week that Indian Act and hereditary system are oil and water as far as the Gitxsan are concerned. That there is no opportunity for the band councils to engage in major projects on the traditional territories or have any say on the traditional territories outside of their jurisdiction of reserve.
Is it, just to be clear, is that something you've heard said, or are you saying that is?
Well, I heard
indeed,
it just this past week.
And is that a true statement?
I think if we're looking for an analogy, yeah, it's not that oil and water they can coexist. They don't mix. So when we coexist, like we said, the chiefs are council members and council members are chiefs, right? So, but we don't have, the conversation is strictly about at a council level is strictly about council business on reserve, programs and services on reserve.
Now, everyone's seen that cartoon, The Martian lands on Earth, and the first thing they say is, take us to your leader. So,
right.
so if that Martian landed here, where would someone take them to?
I guess it depends what the Martian wants to do. Really, right? If he wants to apply for a status card, he'd go to the band office, right? If he's looking for family connected to the band, then he'd go to the band office, right? If he's looking to talk about economic opportunities, or if he's looking to learn, like yourself, about the territories and who we are as Gitxsan, then you'd go to the hereditary chiefs. So you would go to the people, make the connection to an office, whichever office that may be, and they'll point you in the right direction of who to talk to.
Now, there are, is it 4 or 5 animal clans named after animals?
Yes.
There's 5?
Well, not all animals. So we have the Delgamuukw, which is the wolf clan, and that's who I'm a member of. Yes.
You're not merely a member, you are the chief.
One of the chiefs. So we have houses, a number of houses in each clan. So it's a factory. So, we have the wolves and the Delgamuukw, and then we have the Ayookw, which are the frogs, here in the east, and they're called the Canada, further downstream in the west. And then we have the Kispiox, which are the fireweed. But we also have the eagles, the Ayookw. So there are some animals, plants and animals.
And does each one of those have a fully freestanding governance system that is unique and autonomous?
We as a nation, we as a nation have that governance, and the house group is the foundation of that governance. It's the house itself. So the individual houses within each clan. Those houses within a clan will work together. The clans themselves can work together, right? And then the nation. So that's the structure, right? So within a house group, within Giluget, there is wing chiefs, and then there's a number of those houses and chiefs that fall within a clan. So there's a number of us that are Delgamuukw, that are hereditary chiefs and wing chiefs in that clan. And it's the clans that we've got. When we're feasting, there's always, of course, one clan serving, hosting, and then 2 clans sitting as witnesses in the Giluget in the feast.
Now, the feast system, the feast hall, could you explain what that is? Is it in any sense comparable to a legislature, or is it completely different?
Well, I think it's referred to as our state of government, right? It is, because we have the hierarchies of our chiefs, wing chiefs, matriarchs, house members, everybody in which has a role. Right? So when the House of Respect, which is the Giluget, is where we feast, and that's what it's referred to as, is the House of Respect. It is the place of governance for the Gitxsan. It is the place that where we reaffirm our connection to our territories. It is the transitioning of names, hereditary names, to the successors. It is the validating of your territories. It is a place of truth-telling. It's a place of witnessing. So you are accountable to all the chiefs that are. So when you tell your connection to the land, when you conduct your business and bury your loved ones and publicly pay your debts, then the witnesses and their chiefs and house members, they're there to witness. Makes us all accountable, right? In the sense that we follow our laws and so yeah, feasts are definitely our legislature. So there can be conflicts, but there can be conflict resolution also in the feast. And it is it's a hierarchy. Everything we do is hierarchical. Like who speaks when, depending on what village you're in, how you line up, is all in line of your rank within your house.
Now I know there's public knowledge or things you're willing to be public, and there's private knowledge. So I leave it to you to decide, what you like to share, of course. But I wonder if you would paint me a picture with words of what is the feast house. I know it can differ. It's not one kind of building necessarily, but what is in the feast house? What is the site that would present itself were I to be present in a feast house during a feast such as the ones you've referenced? What would I see? Who's there? How are they seated? What are they doing? What happens? How long do they gather? Because it is an ancient system, but it's also different from another First Nations feast system, I'm sure. Yeah,
I'm sure it is. I think that the similar in the region, but I think we're not all the same. The Gitxsan have their own unique ways in which we feast. So, for example, we get our dachget as Giluget from the community of Kispiox. That's where we were brought in when we came from the historical village of Goldoo and Gitxsan before then. We were accepted into the village of Kispiox. So that's where we have our power. Dachget is our power. So when we feast there, that's our rightful place to feast and do our business. And our business being transferring of names, right, paying debts, and so forth. So when you go to a feast in Kispiox, it is a community hall. So it's a large building, 50 by 75 maybe, or something to that degree. And the tables, because if it's our feast, then the Delgamuukw are hosting. So that's all the Delgamuukw will come and support our house when we feast. And so the doors in the afternoon, maybe the doors open at 4 o'clock. And we'll have hired, what I mean by hired is that someone outside of the Delgamuukw clan to help us seat the chiefs. So seat all of the guests, but really acknowledge publicly the chiefs. So when they come to the door, there's a talking stick and they're greeted and their name is called and they're escorted to their rightful seat, the seat that they are the only ones to sit in as a chief. So that the tables are all situated in split in half almost. So you have the frogs on the right-hand side, and then you'll have the Gitxsan on another side. And then you'll have more Gitxsan from Delgamuukw, because the Kispiox will sit along the wall, and then you have Delgamuukw, which is another village. And then you have the Ayookw village, and then you have Kitwanga seating, and then Gitxsan. So each of the villages, when they travel to feast, they have designated tables that they sit at as well. And the hereditary chiefs have designated seats, and wing chiefs have designated seats to the left or to the right of each table. So when you come, you'll see stacks of bread, boxes of apples, oranges, bananas, crackers, sandwiches, fried bread, all sorts of soup, pots of soup in the kitchen. You'll see a number of pails of mixed fruit. So what we do is we invite the people to come to witness our business. But when we start, we always start by feeding them. So we will feed them the soup, and all of the wolves will contribute to the food. And so it's organized in a way that we serve the hot soup, and we serve the fruits, and then we'll serve the bread, and then the apples, oranges, bananas, crackers. And so we make sure that we send them home with full tummies and some so'o, we say, which is a little extra food to travel home with. So once we're finished serving them, then the business starts. So we'll be looking at, if it's, for example, a funeral feast, then we'll be looking at paying our workers. And our workers are the father clan, the Wilsawit, and those are the folks that will purchase the casket or the urn, purchase the clothes. They're secretaries. Secretaries we have because they need to record everything. They need to record what chiefs come to support, the chiefs that come to sing their limphoi, which is their morning song. So they track all of the people that are doing for the grieving family in the clan, so that we can pay them back publicly for their support and their help. So the secretaries will pay them, and then of course we have the minister or the grave diggers and people who dig the hole and so forth. So we have all these workers, and so we bring gifts. Totes and totes and totes of different gifts. And so we always make sure who the workers are before you come, so you know that you can bring and contribute to the gift boxes give the appropriate size or things that are meaningful to the workers. And then we announce publicly, and we announce the work that they've done for us. In order to pay them financially, in addition to their gifts, and all of the wolves pay hawal, they call it, which is the contribution, financial contribution to the pot. So we all line up in rank, and the money that it goes into the pot is typically is highest with the chief, and lower amounts is. So we all line up, and every person that contributes, their name is announced, so people can see, to witness who is contributing. And then we have the father side, right? So it's all connected, so that you have, if it's your father that's feasting, then you haircut. So you help your father. If it's your grandfather clan, then you stand in line and you contribute for your father. If it's your wife or your husband, Andamanak, you stand in line and you contribute. It's all, what they reference is a bit of almost a tax, that you would support your family because you have access to their territory, or you've been given food from their territory. So this is a bit of reciprocity in that you support your family. And it also is, we loan people money, our family money. So if I got a loan from my in-laws, it shows publicly that they support me and that I'm part of their family and so forth. So once all the money is, then we separate it into paying our workers financially as well as with gifts. And if there's any names to be transferred, then we publicly transfer those names at a headstone feast a year later. And once those names are at a headstone feast, those names will be transferred. And it's a different style of feast. It's a different energy, of course. At the funeral feast, it's about, the only business we conduct is the funeral. Is this the paying the expenses for our workers? And then the headstone is more of a celebratory feast when you after a year you've completed your mourning, and now it's time, you've raised the headstone, and we pay all the workers the inauguration per se of the successor, as the name is given. We do spiritual nochnochs, so that's blowing the power into the new chief, and then at the end of the night, once the blanket is put on, then they're, as my Aunt Pearl would say, is that they're inaugurated. So that's what a feast would look like, and it starts sometimes at 5 o'clock. It can go to 2 in the morning. It ranges depending on the type of feast. Right? So it can be done at 11. It can be done 2 in the morning. I went to a feast in Kiluget the other day, and I got home at 3 in the morning. It just depends. It takes as long as it takes, and we don't rush it.
In terms of questions that have to be settled, decisions that have to be made by the nation, how are things decided? Who makes the final decision? Who's responsible for that? No matter what the decision is.
Right. Again, it's about the chiefs having the autonomy to make decisions on their own territory. But once we get into these larger projects, then it really has to be about working together and collaborating and engaging chiefs, because the potential threat of a large pipeline and something happening, right? Or the compressor stations or what have you, that pollution and so forth. That potential impact, will impact more than just those who are territory holders. So engaging in these larger projects, I think for government, they want to see us, they want to just negotiate with one person or the smallest group possible. And we get the fact that you can't negotiate or make deals with 60 plus people, right? So, but we have to have our own internal consultation as Gitxsan, and to determine, right, how are we collectively going to make the decisions, and how are we going to represent as a nation. And that takes time. It takes each house group having their own time to collect the information and the science on, for example, a pipeline. And it takes time for larger groups, so maybe clan meetings. And it takes time for those clan meetings to come together as a nation, right, to determine really, is this in the best interest? Is this following our laws? Is it protecting the environment? And some folks, we want to say that it's economically, right, in the best interest. But there's a fine line and a balance that has to be had around, is the economy or the economic gain worth the sacrifice or the threat of our environment? And so hereditary chiefs have to take into consideration the collective contributions and the collective consequences when we make those decisions. So it is determining who is the rightful decision maker.
Now, when the Canadian National Railroad came through in those days, there probably wasn't a consultative decision process with the Gitxsan people as to whether to put that through, unless there was, and I haven't heard of it. They just put it through. Since that time, there have been different economic opportunities that are more site-specific that Gitxsan has participated in, increasingly been involved in. Mining is a pretty good example of an industry that is confined to, largely speaking, except for roads maybe, to that one location, as long as you're managing the water outflows and these environmental risks. But it's in one place. It's not spread across hundreds or 1,000 kilometers. But in this day and age, we have a situation of suddenly a lot of demand. At one time, within the last 10 years, there were 18 or 20 different coastal LNG projects, each one of which required the gas to move from where it comes from, which crosses east to west across different territories. And so in this last decade, there's been an enormous amount of discourse in this. And some of it has gone better than others. All of it seems to draw. If it's long distances, I can't think of a case where it hasn't been full of different kinds of conflicts. Eventually those are resolved. Maybe the project is cancelled, or maybe there's other ways to resolve those conflicts. But and here we are. You're right now. I happen to know you're living through one such decision, and it has become seen, I think, in the outside world, at least of people who pay attention to such things, that you've got a lot on your plate here with this very question, and that you've been giving me context for. So, if I may, I'd like to examine this one a little more deeply. There is a project, the Prince Rupert Gas Transmission, PRGT.
Right.
And again, this is one that would feed an LNG plant in the Nass River estuary, owned by or permitted and supported strongly by the Nisga'a First Nation. And to create that, a pipeline has been drawn on the map that crosses through a number of different jurisdictions within the traditional governance system, within that 22,000 square kilometer territory of which you spoke. So I'm just trying to set it up here because I think there's a lot of detail, there's a lot of mythology, there's a lot of things that are true, but also maybe not so true.
Right.
So what's true? What is happening now? What is the decision? What do you think are the most salient facts that, whether it's members of the nation or outsiders, should want to know about what's going on?
Well, to be honest with you, I don't really know what's going on.
Okay.
Right. So back to the sort of the pressures that government decision-making process has streamlined who they're going to consult with, and the Gitxsan have made, and when I say Gitxsan, some chiefs have made the decision that a smaller group would be the ones to consult about this project. So, and unfortunately, we don't have, if we're not in those meetings, to be honest with you, we don't have the information. So I don't know, to be honest with you, what PRGT pipeline project. I don't know the route, right? If I'm looking for information, I can find it, but I'm also anticipating that the Gitxsan will give us that information and share with us and include us in what to expect.
The Gitxsan, your Gitxsan. So what Gitxsan are
those who have made those who are what the government is terming them as impacted chiefs. Okay. That's the newest term, impacted chiefs, and I disagree with that term. I believe that we have the Aboriginal rights collectively. We also have a collective responsibility to keep peace and to look in the best interest of the nation, as well as our individual houses. So impacted chiefs to me is if there's a disaster or a leak or the compression, is the animals, the air and the water don't have jurisdiction, right? They don't know boundaries. So it's of my opinion that we're all going to be impacted if anything goes wrong. So, but no, I haven't personally been invited to a meeting where the science is being shared, and you know, this signing of this agreement, I understand, was many years ago, right? So a lot of things have changed in the way of the assessment and so forth. But yeah, I don't have enough information to know myself if this is a project that's in the best interest of the Gitxsan or not at this point. I struggle with the fact that our government has decided, I thought we were supposed to go, reduce our carbon footprint, but we're still talking pipelines. And I understand it's a cleaner source of energy than coal and oil, but I still see it's still a fossil fuel. So as a Gitxsan person, not paying attention to anything else, just looking at our environment with this global commitment to reduce our footprint, I'm a bit confused about why we're still talking, or we're still trying to put pipelines in. So, yeah, I don't have a lot of information to say whether or not it's a good idea for the Gitxsan, and this is why I see it as a opportunity for us as Gitxsan people to reestablish our consultation and decision-making process as a nation. Mm-hmm. But government doesn't necessarily want, right, to take the time, and I don't necessarily believe they respect our laws and our governing structure and decision-making processes enough to allow for that to happen.
And you're referring to the provincial, federal government,
yeah.
So just the provincial?
Provincial government, yeah.
And
industry, like the assessment process and so forth, right?
Well, you've got concerns and questions that you've just raised that a lot of people have in the world, but at the same time, you are saying, what if there was more information? So that bespeaks open-mindedness to consider everything once you have it. What do you think methods would be? If provincial government probably thinks that, well, we've spent 10 years putting all the information out, we better go back over our processes and figure out how we missed the Gitxsan.
Right.
But maybe industry would be wanting to look at how they are ensuring that they haven't gone through exercises that they thought were fulsomely explicating their emissions, but they actually haven't hit the target because there's lots of people saying I'm left out. Like, what do you think are some ways that both the civil servants or their masters and also the corporate people could do better?
Right. Well, I was really hopeful with the free prior informed consent, and with the government with the UN Declaration and DRIPA. I was really hopeful that we were going to get to a place as Gitxsan that if industry did come, that we would be granted the opportunity to really be able to incorporate our laws, incorporate our decision-making processes. We have the right to self-determination. They recognize our rights and over the territories. They know that we have laws. We're a civilization, so therefore we have laws. So I was really hoping to see that the consultation process would be far more meaningful, in that we as Gitxsan could maybe develop our own environmental assessment process, in the sense that to figure out how we determine whether or not this project is suited for us, that aligns with our values, aligns with our decision-making processes, but right now I just don't see that's been afforded to us in a way that they have their own environmental assessment process. We're invited into what I assume is to review and have some input, because I mean the hereditary chiefs that have made have signed on with PRGT at this point, they wouldn't be making decisions that would undermine our laws. They're not. Their decision to sign on is intended to support and help. Right? They are doing what they feel is in the greater good of the people, and I believe that. But I also believe that the science and the process of how the government wants to expedite things as well, expedite decisions.
Now, Bill 41, the DRIPA, Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act, the DRIPA law passed in November 2019, so it's been around now almost 7 years.
Yeah.
That has one section, Section 7, which has been utilized by your neighbors or nearby neighbors, the Gitxsan Nation, in particular with the Escape Creek project. They've utilized that to become the permitting authority, over that restored old mine.
Okay.
Section 7 seems to hold the promise of what you've spoken of in having that decision-making authority.
Right.
In that case, it's over a point source project, that one mine. And it was announced with great fanfare. Actually, the Minister of Mines came to a conference that my organization has been doing for a number of years. And before the official decision was made, years back, gave us a sneak peek into that a month or so before. It was a big deal because we'd never seen that. It was a law passed. It is still in effect in British Columbia, but we have not seen it apply to different kinds of projects that cross over large distances, linear infrastructure. I don't know if you're so much involved in the particular application of DRIPA, but suppose that this had some benefits. Do you see it as maybe a solution to the gap you're talking about, or the absence to solve this issue?
Yeah, and I mean, if we can be afforded the opportunity to do that, but I think for PRGT, that decision was made, is it greater than 10 years ago? So the decision's been made, right? So for projects moving forward, I'm hoping that, yes, absolutely, that the Gitxsan, right, if we deem it appropriate based on the nation's consensus-based decision-making, that a project is in the best interest economically and environmentally, then my hope is that the UNDRIP, the framework and the DRIPA, the laws, can put us into a position where we can have a much stronger input and consultation and determination of whether or not that project's in the best interest of us.
And does that depend entirely on that bill being in effect? If the BC Conservatives become the government in BC and do what they say they will do and abolish that law, will that be vaporized, or has it already made changes in the system that are going to have a permanent impact on how things are done?
Well, I think it's given us a taste of what's possible, right? And I'm not sure what the Conservatives will do, right? If they pull it back, we go back to the way we've always been, right? We go back to fighting for our place at the table, right? And so I'm skeptical, right? Because what Premier Eby's doing now with DRIPA wanting to remove sections because it's potentially, the court's rulings are potentially undermining his laws.
Hot water.
Right, absolutely. And I can't help but say that, we know what that feels like to have your laws undermined and challenged, right? It's not a comfortable feeling, but it's moving forward. I don't know. What the government will do.
So we have DRIPA right now. We have some politicians say they'll get rid of it. We have others saying we'll change it.
Right.
There's a lot of upset going on. Nothing's been resolved.
Right.
It's causing delays in all kinds of different ways.
Right.
It's causing confusion. I've heard things said. I see things said in social media that I think are disgusting.
Right.
I can't believe we're at a time when this is happening. There's this polarization, and it's unbelievable. But there's so much complexity in this because we have a treaty process that, if a nation is in that process, decades might pass before. Just in the last few days, from where we talk at this time, we're sitting here in May of 2026. The Gitxsan Nation has, after 30 years, seen their treaty aspirations become a bill, Bill 21, that is in the legislature.
Right.
So maybe it'll be passed while this session is going.
Right.
They have that treaty process. I don't want to get into whether it gets do or don't, because that's not really your domain in your role. But you've also got the charter rights under Section 35 of the Canadian Charter. There are inviolable, specific stated rights in the very constitutional document of this nation that cannot be altered, and that
That's
are.
right.
I think there are lots of people who think those are highly desirable freedoms or rights, that have allowed there to be a generation of jurisprudence, including a case. I'd love to get your thoughts on this. This is where I'm going.
Right.
Because you're at the center of a incredibly significant constitutional case here in this community. So you've got DRIPA as well, which is a international human rights treaty turned into a British Columbia law and a Canadian law, because there's two in both Parliament and BC legislature, both passed laws from DRIPA. And then there's traditional governance, and you yourself are the very definition of a traditional governance leader. So you have a number of different parallel lanes. To the outsider, or even to people who aren't outsiders, it must be kind of confusing. So I think if you're a non-Indigenous Canadian, you live in a city, you've got maybe a local alder person, a councillor, you've got a mayor in your city, you've got a premier in your province, and you've got a prime minister in your country. If someone says, who's in charge? It's not too hard to explain that.
That's right.
Now you might say, well, my family is very important to me. My matriarch or my patriarch is really in charge of my life, or mom, dad, grandpa. Okay, so people have that too, but it's more of a choice, I guess. Anyways, it still comes back to this question that I'm struggling with of who decides, because you've got these different rights. Now, Delgamuukw, tell me what this is and what it means in defining the rights that you have in your particular role.
So the Delgamuukw decision, right? First of all, you touched on the Constitution, Section 35, right? So our chiefs at that time, they worked hard to contribute to Section 35. That came out in, I believe it was 1981. 82. So we had some role, right, in exercising and communicating Section 35. Right?
This very nation did,
yes,
because it was at the heart of this quest.
And so the way I understand it from chiefs that were a part of that process was that they wanted to get the Constitution Section 35. We didn't get all we wanted in there. We didn't get title, right? So, but we got Aboriginal rights. And so it set them up for the Delgamuukw court case, right, where we're still going after title. And we got, 1997, right? So I think that went in 1983. They started the court case, and then the decision came in 1997. So a lot of years of our nation organizing and determining how we would convey who we are, right, on the stand. So there was an awful lot of determining the skill sets of our nation. So we had to determine which elders would speak and when they would speak and what would they speak to. There was translators. So there was lots of preparation and determination, and because we're a matrilineal society, then there was a majority of the women. Our women chiefs were on the stand for that reason. My grandmother was selected, chosen to be the first to give testimony on the stand because of her knowledge, and so she could lay the foundation, right, to begin that process of laying the foundation for us. So super proud of her, because that wasn't an easy, all of them, there's 54 of them, all of them Gitxsan Nation. It took a lot of because the language, English isn't their first language, right? So it took a lot of learning, took a lot of understanding what was expected of them and so forth. So anyways, we organized and went through the Delgamuukw court case, and we came out with recognition of our oral histories and the fact that we do have Aboriginal rights. So what does that mean? It means that, yes, we can hunt and fish. We don't have to worry about, trap lines specifically. We hunt and fish as we need to. Ceremonies of access on the land the way we need to. We didn't get title. So but we also got the government responsibility duty to consult with us, because our rights were not extinguished. So they have to consult with us and they have to accommodate us. So, and then of course with UN Declaration coming in, there's increased the standard of how we're recognized as Indigenous people. And then DRIPA came in. So there's all these frameworks and now new laws that should position us, but also all of the court cases, right? The Calder, the Haida, the Chilko, there's a number of different cases too. So we really should have what we need, really. But we have to have the will of the government to invoke those laws and those practices on the ground, so that all of these supports and the things, the rights and so forth, translate on the ground to everyday negotiation and consultation.
So a lot has happened during your life, your career, coming of age, coming into the leadership in more recent years. How are things for the Gitxsan? Are they pretty good? Have they come a long way?
Since the court case, unfortunately, we haven't implemented this. I don't feel that we've implemented what we've in the court case. But we did what we thought we needed to do was, from the court case, we were encouraged by government to enter into a treaty conversation, right, with the BC Treaty Commission, and so we did. But the government didn't recognize, our governing structure, our host groups, but also we weren't willing to agree to the land selection model, because through treaty we would have to give up portions of our traditional territory, and as I said earlier, is that traditional territory is connected to who we are. So if I give up my territory, what does that mean to me and my house as a chief? And this is where my crests are connected. This is our totem poles. So it was non-negotiable in the sense back in the early 90s that the Gitxsan would agree to a land selection model. So treaty just wasn't in our best interest back then. We'd have to give up too much to settle with a government for only portions of the territory that we already now have Aboriginal rights to, the 22,000. So I was a part of the negotiation team. This was our office. This room was our communication department. I was a part of the communications in Treaty 1 and moved to being a trainee and negotiator trainee on side tables for eligibility enrollment back in the day, and then eventually moved to chair the trilaterals with the here in this building back in the day. And yeah, so we still have work to do, to be honest, but I think the government is in the same predicament there, right? They have this UNDRIP framework and they've made some progress in aligning the laws with UNDRIP and DRIPA, but we have some work to do as Gitxsan still as well.
So on the governance side, you have the work to do. From the point of view of the quest for being able to have the world unfold for Gitxsan as Gitxsan would like it to unfold.
Right.
The needs of individuals of attaining whatever it might be,
right,
education, or freedom from want, different kinds of wants. How are things going in that regard?
Well, see, and this is the argument is that if the Gitxsan want to get increase our economic position and to support our people and our needs, then we have to have some engagement with economic opportunities. And this is where our community struggles, right? It's finding the balance of engaging in economic opportunities to service the needs of our communities and our people, our nation, but at what cost to the territory? So this is what we as a nation have to figure out, right? So what minimum standards, what expectations, what are we willing to do, and what are we not willing to do. So what's the tipping point for us as Gitxsan people when we talk about larger economic projects? So the perspective is that some don't want to disturb our traditional territories at all, right? And some say that we have to sacrifice and we have to engage in some way in order to prosper, in order to make sure that people work, that we continue to be healthy communities. We can't continue to function on government, right, or local small businesses, that we have to engage in a larger way. And this is up for debate. This is the perspectives, and this is what we as Gitxsan have to figure out if we're going to move forward. We have to understand what are the parameters, what are we willing to do, and what are we not willing to do.
And I feel I'm hearing that there is this desire, openness to solving that, wherever
Yes.
it falls.
Yes.
But solving it through an inquiry, through the acquisition of more knowledge, more something.
Yes.
So is that happening?
There's definitely conversations, but it hasn't happened formally, in the sense that I think right now there is the varying perspectives on whether or not PRGT is whether or not it's in the best interest of the people, the environment, right? So there's varying perspectives and contrasting perspectives. So we have to get to a place where we can trust one another again as a larger group. Mm-hmm. We have to get to a place where we can humble ourselves to be able to, and that's both, right, all sides, right, and because this really has polarized our community to some degree. There's this differing of perspectives.
Well, something's happened here when it should come to pass that vehicles owned by the Gitxsan Development Corporation, this was in the news,
Right.
I wrote about this, I was shocked,
Right.
frankly, hit by arson. And that's, I think there's a long history in Canada, probably not just Canada, of, say, corporate symbols being targeted.
Right.
Here was not really a corporate symbol, it was a symbol of aspiration of a nation pursuing its own self-determination. Mm-hmm. I would have thought, based on what I saw, suddenly we're going to, someone is saying, I'm going after you because I guess I don't want you to do that. Mm-hmm. So that's disturbing. That seemed like a new chapter. I wasn't expecting that. Right. I thought if First Nations, as a result of rights, as a result of progress, mm-hmm. in those rights, can make decisions, right. But still be targeted in that way. Like that was the thing that shocked me. Mm-hmm. So when you talk about, you make reference, I don't know if you refer to that, but how does that mm-hmm. sit in the community?
Well, I think that we have to understand that first of all, violence is just unacceptable, right? If violence is, but we also have to understand that there's tensions, right? That people need to feel a part of, and many of them don't feel that they were a part of this decision that happened again many years ago, right? So I think that we have to be cognizant of the fact that it's a natural human reaction, that if you don't feel included, it turns into an us and them, right? And so if they don't feel that there's another avenue for them to be able to have their voice heard, because there is genuine fear around what this pipeline project will do to our land, to the place they call home, to their hunting, to their fishing, to their trapping, right? So, but also I just want to address a little bit of that shock that you're feeling, and I believe that shock comes from, there's a bit of a stereotype that I've recognized and seen in my life, and that is that Gitxsan people, that we all have the same values, and that we all make decisions together, and that we all think alike, We all view the territories the same, that there isn't differing perspectives and differing values amongst a nation of people. And I've seen this pop up in my life many times. You know, I was in an MBA program at UNBC, and when the Unist'ot'en with the Wet'suwet'en was happening, and I had one of the classmates there say, "I'm so confused why they're divided. I thought you all work together, you all make decisions that are all in the same interest," right? So I think there is a little bit of a stereotype, and that's why the shock comes, that there isn't differing opinions, that there isn't different perspectives in a nation of like ours. So I think that's it happens where we're a group of people that think individually, right? That have different experiences. Their worldviews are very much the same in the cultural perspective, but as time has gone on, we have differing opinions about what's good for our economy and what's good for our land and our people.
I suspect it's no different here than anywhere else, where most humans are conflict averse.
Mm-hmm.
They'd rather just get on with the thing that they're interested in.
Yes.
And leave that.
Yes. Absolutely.
So you've got that here too.
Yes. Yeah. Life is so much easier to put your hand up and not engage with it. But we as a nation, we have to find a way to reorganize if we're going to be dealing with large economic projects on the territory. We have to.
Well, given everything going on in the world, you'd have to conjecture that there will be more, not less,
right.
These questions that need to be resolved
right.
in the future. The issues around each specific one will all have to be examined. There'll be people with a point of view that they want to throw in,
yes.
or they insist they have to prevail in, and no one else can. They have to be the winner.
Mm-hmm.
And lots of people will insist on being that person, and it'll be conflicted.
Right.
Could you give me some examples of how Gitxsan traditional law is applied in everyday life?
Gosh.
One example.
It's there's a lot, right? Okay. So in kinship, in our relationships, in our relationship to the land, how we make our decision making, how we relate as families, how we show up and who we show up for, and what capacity we show up. All is our laws are who we are in our Gitxsan culture, right? So how I interact with my nieces and nephews, for example, or because of my responsibility as being a Wet'suwet'en or a father clan to them, right? Is our laws, is the responsibility that I have to take care of them in ways that I have responsibilities to teach them, right? It's how I interact with my granddaughter, my grandchildren. It's because I have a responsibility as their grandmother to help teach and guide them, right? How my son interacts with them as an uncle has a responsibility to how he teaches them. So it's how I relate and how I support other chiefs, right? So it's really hard, and I hadn't noticed. So until you asked me to try separate that out of our everyday life, is that how I conduct myself is important, because everything I do is a reflection on my house, right? So not to bring shame to my family, how I conduct myself. So when I speak, how I speak is if I'm doing things that will cause shame or embarrassment, then that's a reflection on my family. So it's a law that you don't dirty your blanket. It's a law that you don't bring shame to your family, right? So your conduct it's in all your interactions, really.
It's the example you set for others.
That's right. Yes. So it's our laws are a part of who we are.
And, lots of people would say, hey, I've got that hereditary law in my family because I'm setting an example for everyone around me.
Right.
So it sounds like very relatable system. Is there any way that it might be seen as, okay, that's more exotic, I'm not expecting that. It's something, really different to, say, the perspective of a city dweller with no First Nations linkages in a way.
What do you mean exotic? Like
I don't know. I mean, just
something that's
unexpected. You've got some, I don't know. I'm just
laws. Are you referring to laws?
Laws,
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
in terms of traditional laws that come from the Ayookw system.
Right. Well, we have laws in our relationships, right? We have laws that determine who you can't marry within your own clan, right? So you have to. So when you're selecting a spouse, it has to be from. As if you're Gaboo, you have to be looking at the Gitxsan or the Luxale, right? So that might be a bit of a. That's not something that you see in Western, right? So that's but it's a super important law in our culture because it ensures our lineages of there isn't inbreeding,
Right.
So it keeps our basically our genetic pool from.
Yes,
right?
and humans generally figure out this in their own way,
Yes.
whatever culture they're in.
Yes, and then because our culture is also built on reciprocity. So when, as I explained earlier, in your feasting, if you're a Lachgaboo, you're a wolf clan, and you're at the door hosting, then your spouse should be sitting, right? So that there is this level of reciprocity that happens in our feast system as well, right? And also, it's the concern about what happens to your children if both parents are of the same clan. What happens to the children, right? They don't have a Wilsawito father clan that they can lean to that isn't separate from their own house clan. So yeah, those might be some unique ones.
Mm-hmm.
Or,
when a member of the community passes.
mm-hmm.
And I'm interested in the longer term. Over time, will this custom continue to be part of life, Gitxsan of the future, because of their perspective changing, or is it going to be likely to be because, and it's not only Gitxsan and
Mm-hmm.
British Columbia First Nations that I'm familiar with. When a member dies, everything stops
Mm-hmm.
because of the traditions that then kick in. Could
Mm-hmm.
you tell me about that system, that tradition?
Is that everything stops?
Well, in the sense that mourning is
Oh yes.
probably a more all-encompassing
Mm-hmm.
activity than it is in a lot of other communities.
One of the strong beliefs we have is that we have strong beliefs in the supernatural, and so we believe that when there's death, then there is the death spirit that is amongst us, and if we draw attention to ourselves, then we attract the death spirit to our families. So there is the understanding that we sit still, we be quiet, right? So there's no song and dance. So when we feast, and we've been forced to feast, even during days of immediate grieving for families, because there's been so many deaths in our nation that we're having to overlap. And so we have to be as respectful and cautious of those strong beliefs in order to protect our own families, in order to ensure that we slow this death down. It's more than the notion of just respecting a family's grieving process, which it is that too, of course, but it is the belief that the deaths will continue if we don't slow down.
And the tradition of this ancient civilization, do you think in 100 years it will also be as active?
I sure hope so. because I think of my great-grandfather, William Holland, and the efforts that he made to try to push back on the reserve, delineating and moving us off the territory and selling the lands outside of the reserve. And I think about my grandmother, who is on the witness stand, and all the work that she did to contribute to our culture. And I think of my mother, and I think about my grandfather, and I think of all the other chiefs that I'm going to get emotional, but all the other chiefs. And their sacrifices and contributions to making sure that our culture stays alive, right? And that we continue to take our place on the territory, that we continue to strengthen our governance structure, and we continue to support our laws and protect our lands. This is an inherent right that we're all born into, and we've had so much sacrifice and effort from our ancestors that we have to keep it going. So we have to continue to feast. We have to encourage our young people to find relevance in their life for our culture. We have to continue to kwaliens, which means to teach the young people, to inspire them. We have to include them. This is why it's so important to include, so that our nation, all the members in our nation, know that they have a place, know that they're valued, know that their voice is important, right? That the role they play, not just in the feast hall, but in our families and on the land and amongst our nation, that they know that they have a role. Because if they don't feel they have a role, they don't feel valued, will they engage in our culture, right? And if we don't have the teachings and the engagement and the supporting, then we run the risk of our culture being minimized. And so we all have a vested interest in doing what we can to keep people engaged, keep people learning our laws, learning our system. It's an oral, right? It's an oral history. So we all have a responsibility individually to our houses, to our Wilnaduff, but collectively to the nation, to make sure that we keep this, our way of life and our connection to the land, strong and healthy, and to live for another multitude of thousands of years.
Thanks for that depth. Do you have enough water? Do you want to?
Yeah, I'm good. Thanks. I believe that they're with us. When that emotion comes, it feels like they're with us.
So
They've made their presence known, and so it brings up emotion.
When I hear a First Nations person using the term 7 generations, I'm kind of thinking that's a forward-looking thing, but maybe it's backward-looking at the same time.
Absolutely. When we make decisions, we have to consider the ancestors. We have to consider our grandparents, the people that have come before us, the work that they've done, the teaching that they've given us. Right? We also have to be cognizant of what's happening in our present day. What are the needs of the people today? And when we make those decisions, we have to be looking at the generations that come after us. Because as many wise chiefs have said in our nation, is that we're really just borrowing this land from our grandchildren. So we have to be very careful with the decisions that we make today, right? So we do bring the past, the present, and the future into the decisions that we make. That's how I believe we know that we're making balanced, good decisions for our people.
A lot of the passion that I bring to this, from just in a general sense, around the topic of aspiration, around the topic of aspirations being realized, and I inherently believe that the duty of government is to get out of people's way so they can do what they decide they want to do. It's not the job of government to tell them what they should be doing.
Right. Yes.
And I think a lot of people feel that.
Yes.
So in my travels in the period 2016, 2017, when I traveled through Highway 16 corridor to the coast, I realized right away I could only go to places where I was invited. So I went out of my way to see if I could get an invitation by asking someone who knew someone to do the, and where that resulted in someone, some a chief or an authoritative member of the First Nation I hoped to visit, it invited me. I set up a meeting, and I got to meet a lot of people that way. And where I didn't get a response, it was like, I don't know why I didn't get a response, but maybe in future I'll be able to do that. So we'll leave that for another time. But what I did learn in so many communities, especially that whole corridor, the CGL corridor, as I'd call it, where there was so much activity and media activity, at certain points a media spectacle, I would say. That was intriguing because it had a lot of heat, a lot of consequence, and I went to a lot of the nations I got invited to, and I had matrilineal leadership, whether in band council or hereditary or that kind of overlap, or both are true. Tell me economic development on these terms. Hey, we got $1 million from this deal. I want to show you what we did with it, and walk me over where I can see in a warm, beautiful new building an elder teaching a room full of children the language that otherwise might be dying.
Right.
Where there's a bus service for that elders to get to the clinic, all that kind of stuff, and telling me this is what we want. Don't you dare. Well, not me, but don't outsiders dare tell us what we can't do, and this is how we're making decisions. I mean,
that's right.
How much is that a part of what people are talking about in the large Gitxsan population centers here?
Right. Particularly about other nations, or just
about themselves?
About themselves. How we make decisions.
Well, how the material wants can be, economic development.
Right.
If it's been argued successfully that, or if it's been argued convincingly that a kind of welfare state ultimately doesn't help anyone, whether you're Indigenous or otherwise.
Right.
Okay, so what do I do about it? We develop our own, and that's certainly everything I heard. The phrase "own source revenue" is one that rings in my ears from the number of times I've heard it from nations saying, "I don't want a dollar that's got a string attached to it that's pulled in Ottawa. I want a dollar that I control because we know what we want to do with it.
Right.
But the only way I can get that is by doing X, Y, or Z." So, this is about making choices in what's available.
Right. Right.
So, I'm just curious about how that economic discussion happens.
And I'm wondering if I think of business as the exchange of service and economic compensation for that service. But I struggle to see the pipelines as this economic service, right? It's a transaction, right? It is a transaction, but it's a transaction of, it gives us it's not necessarily in the form of business, it's a compensation and an accommodation because of our rights. Yes. I don't see it as a sort of a business in a sense that we as Gitxsan people can create our own source revenue from this transaction. We create a lump sum that we can. My understanding is there's a lump sum that we can use to determine what our priorities might be and our needs in our community, and that's the one transaction. And then there's there's apparently jobs that might happen depending on. So I don't see it as, I guess it's the long-term sustainability of these transactions creating an own source revenue for us. Right? I don't see that as being our solution in the sense of the word.
Yeah, if I may, and I don't want to sound like I'm arguing a point, but I think there's something out there.
Right.
So if David Eby is saying, look, I didn't really want LNG either, but that's not why I got into government. But you know what? I'm pursuing it now, even though a couple of years ago I couldn't even talk about it.
Right.
You know, I've been to conferences where he wouldn't say LNG in front of 1,000 LNG people.
Right.
Because he didn't want to do that.
Right.
Well, now he's talking about LNG to anyone who listens. Well, except lately, he's not talking to
Right.
anyone. But that's another issue.
Right.
But you know, he got comfortable talking about LNG, something he didn't want to talk about because he needs the money, because he's
That's right.
the public finances. So and he's realizing one of the few available ways, or only, is to monetize a molecule that exists in abundance in one place, move it to another place,
Right.
and if you can get that right, you can pay for all those things that voters will demand, and if
Right.
he doesn't provide them, they'll vote him out of office. So the next government will say, well, we better get busy getting those things that people are demanding, and they will do the same thing or more of the same thing.
Right.
And then we're back to the same thing, and they get to say, well, you never asked us, we're not in the conversation, so you know, why aren't you mending your ways and getting us into this? Because I can't convince someone on the street here that they should believe that claim, that there's anything in it for us.
Right.
Because it's, how do I show that? So you know, I think the way the world is going, so if they've got this war going on that Trump started in the Middle East, and you got this war that Putin started in Ukraine, and it's disrupted the world's energy. The one country in the world that everyone's looking at right now, saying, you guys, with all the gas,
Yes.
you're 10 days by sea from some of the biggest markets in the world that, you know, have to get it from places that don't, you know, it's all messed up. Hello? So, like, it's a complicated world. How do Gitxsan find a way in that solves conflicts, that addresses gaps in education, that hopefully provide tangible outcomes that creates economic, if not wealth, you know, economic well-being?
Right. I think that we as Gitxsan, we have choices, right? We have this vast territory, this pristine country, that there's all sorts of other ways that the Gitxsan could utilize our traditional territories, our lakip, for projects to create our own source revenue, right? We've got the varying ecosystems, we've got the rivers, but we just need to sit down and figure out how to do that, how to work together, and to determine what economic opportunities we want to create so that we can be self-sustaining in the future, so that we can create our own source revenue and look after our own. We have to sit down and figure that out. We don't have to look at LNG as our only opportunity for creating own source revenue. And that is short-lived as well, right? The jobs will be short-lived, the opportunity, but the pipeline will be there for a very long time. So we need to weigh our options about how do we want to move forward, right? And these cases and UNDRIP and DRIP are helping us to be able to take our place on the land and utilize our lands to create own source revenue and a sense of economy for us to look after our own. But we have options.
This question of outside pressure groups that have a particular, very narrow objective. I mean, at least with industry, you can say, well, they're trying to make some money and they'll share it. You know, if they can make that happen, they'll share some of that money with us.
Right.
With environmental pressure groups, they might say, well, the service we're providing is we're going to save the planet.
Right.
So if you work with us, we'll do that for you. But that claim can be hard to verify. It's a little easier to verify that there's an economic transaction.
Right.
Also, we're seeing, you know, living in Vancouver, I see posters, I see people marching down the street. They're saying, as they did in the CGL, university students who are not claiming to be Indigenous, so they probably aren't, are, you know, standing with what. So I'm not even sure in a lot of cases what they knew, what they were standing for. I remember when Chad Day, who at that time was president of the Telten,
Mm-hmm.
he had posted on Facebook. He went down to the legislature in BC. It was surrounded by students with their Wet'suwet'en posters and opposing CGI. And he recounted going up to a couple of them and saying, trying to test their knowledge. And in his estimation, you could basically say, well, they didn't know a darn thing about the issue that they were. And he was, he wasn't happy about that situation. Yeah. So outsiders with no knowledge, claiming one thing, pretending to represent people they don't really.
Right.
And do you have an issue with that if it exists here?
I believe people have the right. This is the freedoms in this country. We have the right to speak on. There's a concern that folks that come in to support, that may distract or deter our ability to be taken seriously. Honestly, if there's folks that are on our blockades that aren't of our nation, they're allies, but they're not of our nation. So there has been conversation and chatter about the fact that if you go to a blockade, they're not Gitxsan people, and they're allies apparently that have concern over the environment. Is it and maybe the environment as a whole? In the sense of global environment, not just Gitxsan territory. So, they definitely don't represent or speak they shouldn't be the poster of our cause as Gitxsan people, for sure. Right? There's a fine line of, and I say this with the non-government organizations as well, is that there's a place for their support, absolutely. NGOs play an important role in society, the grassroots and the community organizing. And I mean, I've been a part of an NGO myself for a number of years, and they play an important role. But when they're here alongside the Gitxsan, there's a fine line between supporting and leading. So there has to be the conversations around supporting but not leading, and but also being cognizant of the fact that you need to know our laws so that you don't undermine the laws, you don't undermine the authority of chiefs, and you don't undermine our decision-making processes. So there is a fine line, but they serve a important. They do important work in our society. They also there's again this balance of making sure that they don't lead, they support.
There was a term I encountered, I'd never heard it before, and I would say I've never really heard it since. When I was spending time in Wet'suwet'en areas and the ceremonial Wet'suwet'en, it was the term lateral violence. Never heard of it. And I'm sure social workers use it all the time.
Right.
It sounds like it's from their lexicon. Totally alien to me, never heard of it. Anyways, all these people are talking about it in Wet'suwet'en.
Right.
And that was then, maybe it still is true now, but and I said, well, what's that? Well, it's when you're lashing out at your neighbors or your family, and you're doing them harm or threatening to do them harm. And what I went away with was, well, this is a result of there being these tensions and boiling over, and people, as a result of that, people they have something they're disagreeing with, and it's turning into violence. That's lateral violence. It's not a complicated term, I don't think. Maybe
No,
there's some
it's
nuance
not.
to it.
No.
So could I ask you a question about lateral violence?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Lateral violence, a term I've only encountered in the Wet'suwet'en crisis. The term I've used when around 2019 to 2021, 2022, there was so much conflict, and it erupted into news that people in probably a lot of the world saw pictures of the press. But in this context, I also heard the term from First Nations in a lot of cases who supported building that infrastructure, complained of lateral violence, which means lateral violence in the community from their own peers, from those in their communities, directed at
Right.
at others. And I certainly saw evidence that indeed has been through the courts. There have been individuals in certain cases. We've read about that. So it exists. Does it exist here in the Gitxsan territory?
I think it, in all honesty, I think it exists everywhere if the circumstances are put in place. So the Gitxsan, we were historically, when we were living off the land, we were, and we still are in many respects, interconnected. So we had a dependency on one another to survive. So the hierarchy was respected, right? The territory boundaries were respected, right? The environmental and ecological laws that we have to respect the wildlife and the water, and it was all respected. And our spiritual beliefs helped to keep us in line. So that interconnectedness and that interdependency for survival, right, allows a civilization to function well if you have the laws in it, right? So it keeps us all in line, keeps us accountable to one another. But over time, and the more we've embraced colonization, right, the more that interdependency has dissipated, right? So we don't, we're not going to starve to death if we don't share, right? And necessarily, we share, absolutely, but there isn't that life or death situation around survival in that sense. And so when we're making decisions and when we're organizing, we're not organizing in a way that is allowing people the opportunity to voice their opinions, to contribute in a way that they find is meaningful. So they feel threatened. It's a threat of displacement, and a threat to the environment, and a threat to the way they interact with our territories. The threat to the visions in the future that they have for what their children and grandchildren will enjoy. This creates separation. It creates misalignment. And when there's misalignment, I believe that then there's this cause again for us and them. And so, and the longer this goes on, the more violence we start to turn on one another, right? So this is a normal human behavior, right? So in order to mitigate lateral violence, we must go back to invoking our decision-making practices. We must go back and get organized and determine as Gitxsan people, what is it that we want to do on the territories? And we include all the people, right? It doesn't undermine our authority and our autonomy as hereditary chiefs. It strengthens it in the fact that we have more people in our houses and in our nation participating in the destiny of where this culture will land one day. And it's important that we engage them. And this lateral violence will start to dissipate as we start to trust one another and get back working as a cohesive group that is more interdependent yet again in everyday life.
That's a compelling and humane and humanistic portrayal. I appreciate that. Sure. It introduces also a distributed decision-making process that maybe would make it impossible for anything controversial to ever get to yes, any complicated, controversial project. Does that imply that there's no way to get something that's divisive?
No, because we have in our decision-making processes that we talk it through until we get to a consensus-based decision. I just experienced this with a house group a few weeks ago, right? There was a situation where there was more than one person interested or aligned or mentored for the name. So you go through the exercise of bringing people together, and you listen to their opinions and their perspectives and their positions, and you take the time, as the chiefs and matriarchs that were in the room, we take the time to listen to everyone, right? take the time to understand their perspectives. And at the end of the day, we'll all agree by consensus in the fact that some will say, if this is the greater good, then I will sacrifice and agree, right? So that takes time, right? That takes time. And I know in Treaty 1, there was a small portion of the nation that wasn't agreeing with entering into treaty. And we did a variety of methods of communication to ensure that people felt connected. So we made sure that when we went in, we did trilateral communications, that each party had to sign off. All three parties, trilateral engagement sessions in every community, right? So we had newsletters, we had a 1-800 number. Like you make sure that there is all of these opportunities for people to engage and voice, right? And you start by telling people early and bringing everybody on board and working together and working through the issues and the concerns together. It takes time. But at the end of the day, if we can invoke our consensus-based decision-making here in the Gitxsan territories yet again, that when we do, and if we ever do agree as a nation to partner in some other type of major project, then we come with one strong voice, as we say, as one strong heart, right? One heart will come together. And if we bring that level of conviction and unity to a partnership, then it only gives certainty for investors and those who we're partnering with, right? But we have to be willing within our nation, but also the partnership has to be willing to give it the time it deserves and it needs to get to a decision, right? And of course, those are for larger projects, but smaller projects that are on traditional territories, right? They're going to talk to their neighbors. Again, we still have the autonomy as hereditary chiefs to make decisions, but that autonomy, I mean, is if it overlaps, then we have to consult.
One last thing.
Yes.
Just wrapping all this together. You've spoken of internal things. Externally, is there one piece of advice that you could give someone who's a major project to be more successful in the setting that you envision?
So one piece of advice that I could give another nation?
Well, I'm thinking maybe it's an investor company saying,
okay.
That one was hard. Can I? Yeah. Right.
So my piece of advice to an investor or to a
company or to.
I think my advice would be is to come to the Gitxsan Nation early, come with an open heart and an open mind and consideration and respect for our laws, our values, and our governance structure. And be willing to negotiate. We'll have our own environmental assessment process, and to be open to integrating our expectations and our values and our limitations around what we're willing to. I think then it's right. It has its potential for sure, but time is money for them. But my word of advice would be come early. Come with the notion you're going to stay a while, and be open and willing to respect our laws and our place on the land and our authority. And it could end in a strong relationship. Whether it ends up in a project or not is another thing, right? So.